Everybody, Mara Styles here. I'm going live for a minute. I thought I would let you know a little bit about what's happening here at Queen's Park today. I'll give it a few more minutes to see if anybody joins us, but look, this has been quite a day so far, and it proves it's going to be a very interesting week, it looks like. Let me give you a sense of what's going on here. So for months and months and months, this government, hi everybody, thanks for joining. I'll start again in a minute. Maybe I'll wait a few more minutes till people join in. Hi, thanks for joining us. It's Mara Styles here, and I'm at Queen's Park. I'm in my office, and I was we just wrapped up in the chamber, a little early actually, which is kind of weird considering what the government's trying to do here. So it was kind of strange, but we're waiting. We're going to be back here tomorrow morning at 5 in the morning to debate some legislation. But I wanted to give you all a little bit of a sense of what's going on. I can see there's lots of people joining who are education workers, folks who care about education. Thanks for joining me. Hey, Allison. So what happened today? Well, I think we've all been expecting the government to bring in some kind of what they call back to work legislation. They've been threatening it for months now, ever since education workers started the bargaining process, before they were anywhere near being in a strike position. This government has been out there saying, basically just creating some drama, in my opinion, and saying, look, we're going to make sure that schools stay open. Even though, I just want to point out, this is the same government that made sure that classrooms in this province were closed to in-person learning for 27 weeks, which is the worst record during the pandemic of any other province, and one of the worst in the world. And they could have avoided that by having smaller class sizes and investing, but no. Anyways, I digress. So yeah, hi folks, and thanks for joining us from all the way from Vancouver. Nice to see you. Anyways, so what they did today though, is they introduced a bill. They're calling it the Keep Students in Class Act, I think, which is a sort of interesting name for the legislation. This is legislation that tramples on the rights of education workers. Full stop. That's what it is. And it's not even really back to work legislation, because it's actually, workers aren't even in a strike position yet. They're not striking. There are no work actions underway. And the workers we're talking about, by the way, here are QP education workers. And the legislation includes it prohibits a strike, and it imposes fines on workers who take action, despite the legislation, of $4,000 a day. And it imposes a contract, of course, on the workers before the time has even run out for them to negotiate a contract, a deal. So they're still in a position where they could, rather than being here doing this in the legislature, they could be out there at maybe the Sheraton, where, I'm sure QP members are still waiting to negotiate, waiting for the government to show up. But no, they don't want to bother with that. So they just want to override those rights. And so they're just imposing a contract, prohibiting a strike, because they don't care. And I'll mention one other thing that makes it very clear that they know exactly what they're doing, because in this legislation, they invoke the notwithstanding clause, which is essentially their own admission that their bill violates the Charter of Rights. And this is a very scary action that this government has taken over and over and over again. Unfortunately, it is not how the notwithstanding clause is supposed to be used. So it's really shameful. And as Allison points out in the comments here, yeah, it's going to impact all workers, because if they can do it here, they can do it to everybody. And if they can do it to education workers, they'll do it to teachers, to other education workers, and to other sectors. But speaking for a minute about what it means for these particular workers and who's impacted, these are the education workers in our system who are like educational assistants, working with kids with special needs, ECEs, early childhood educators who work in our kindergarten classrooms. It could be office administrators, custodians, the people who keep our schools going, and so many others. And if you've ever had a kid in a publicly funded school or if you yourself have ever worked in a school or been a student, you'll know how important those people are in keeping our kids safe, nurtured, supported. So these workers, there are about 55,000 of them in Ontario that are impacted by this legislation. And 2/3 of them are women, which I want to make note of, particularly because this is a sexist, gendered move as well, 100%. They earn on average $39,000 and less. A third of them currently say that they are using food banks regularly to support their families. And a half of them, at least a half, have at least one more job to make ends meet. So we are all dealing with an increased cost of living, right? I mean, everybody in Ontario is, but these are some of the lowest paid workers doing some of the most difficult work in our schools, and that frankly the whole system relies on. If you talk to a teacher about what it means to have educational assistants in their classroom, they will tell you. I actually asked some people recently, some teachers, do you think they should double the number of educational assistants? What is the support that our kids really need right now? And they were like, you could triple it and we wouldn't even come close. So they're super important workers in our system. I'm sure many of them are joining right now. I know personally, how important they are in our schools. And the problem we have is that in addition to the fact that we aren't, this government is unwilling to actually negotiate with their union, which is outrageous. They're going to really effectively drive down their wages with their imposed contract. And what that means is people are going to start leaving the system, and they already are. And I'm sure a lot of people watching this right now who work in our schools know this is what's happening. It's getting harder and harder to find people to do these jobs because it's so difficult. And they're undercompensated. And like I said, they're often juggling more than one job. So they do it because they love it and it's important, but they are being undercompensated and deeply disrespected. And if you look at what's been happening, we here in Ontario, we've been looking at what's happening with in the healthcare sector. There are not enough nurses. Nurses are leaving the sector. Other healthcare workers are leaving the sector. And the reason they're leaving the sector is because of that disrespect, because the work is not compensated properly, because they've been frozen with this really egregious bill 124 that freezes all of the public sector wages at 1%. And so they're losing money, actually. Their wages are going down, really, when you consider how much cost of living has increased. It's deeply problematic. They're leaving the sector, and this is what's going to happen in education. And then we won't have the people to support the students. So at the end of the day, it has the potential to degrade our entire public education system. And that is what, in addition to, I think, the deeply undemocratic nature of this legislation, undermining collective bargaining rights, which is critical in a democracy like ours. But in addition to that, it is really deeply concerning in terms of how it will impact education. And so when Stephen Lecce stands up there and says, "Oh yeah, we're there, we're just making sure that kids get to go to school and school year isn't disrupted," remember that he's been making threats and not sitting at the bargaining table for months. He is the only one who has been putting our kids' education at risk this year. And this is the plan. This is the plan. And then what happened today is they introduced this legislation, but then that wasn't enough. Then they said, you know what? We want to introduce it really fast, and we want to override all the usual steps that legislation has to go through, the numbers of hours and the debate and the committee time when people get to come to committee and present other perspectives, and where we can actually talk about amending legislation. They don't want to go through that democratic part of the process, so they introduced a motion to speed things up, right? And they've also, over the last few years, slowly really weakened a lot of the rules and traditions of the legislature already. So there's already very few tools that opposition has to hold this up. But they're going to speed this baby through. They're going to have us come in the at 5 a.m. and start debating it. And they're going to try probably not to debate it. They're probably going to try to say nothing so that it goes faster and faster. And we're going to try to, use as much time as we can because that's the right thing to do, because it deserves to be debated. But, it was our colleague, MPP Terrence Kernahan, who's himself an educator, said today in the legislature, he's had this great example. He said, it's like when you're a parent or a teacher and you see kids, small children are losing at a game. They're playing a game and then somebody starts to lose the game. And then suddenly they want to change the rules of the game. The game's underway and they want to change it. That's just like this government. It's just like this government and what they did today and what they're going to keep doing to push this legislation through. So deeply undemocratic. I see a lot of people saying, how can we help you? How can we help you debate this? And what can we do? And I would say keep an eye out for what the union and those workers are going to do. They're going to take the lead. But I would suggest call your MPP, especially if you're in a riding with a conservative MPP. Call your conservative MPP and make sure they know you support those education workers. And I'm going to challenge you, especially parents, really important. Back before the pandemic started, when this government was going to lay off 10,000 education workers and force our kids into 4 mandatory online learning classes, it was education workers who stood up against that and forced them back on their heels so that our kids, didn't lose all those teachers, didn't end up in even bigger classrooms. And parents stood side by side. It was an important moment. So we must do that again. We must do that again. We need to stand with them, and we need to make sure that they know that we're standing with them, because it's a tough call, right? What they're going to be up against right now. So I think we're going to be hearing more in coming days, but do please call, especially conservative MPPs. If you want to come down to the legislature and watch what's happening, the public gallery will be open. It takes a while to get into the building these days. You have to go through security, so come early. But we'll be in here debating this legislation starting at 5 a.m. on Tuesday and on through the week. And yes, as Allison says, even more so now than ever, we need communities to support education workers. We all saw what education workers went through during the pandemic and how they supported our children, our students, and how they supported families. It's our turn to show up for them. It's our turn to show up for them. So folks, I wanted to go live today just to share a little bit of an insight into what's happening here. This government never ceases to amaze me. They are a lot. And, I will also just finish by saying one thing about my own experience, because I've been part of negotiating big collective agreements, and I am absolutely appalled by how lazy this government is and how little they put into this. Like, it is collective bargaining 101. Get down to the table, roll up your sleeves, and listen. And I think that this government has been instead of doing that, they've made a decision long ago to take out a hammer and slam it down. Unfortunately, the lowest paid education workers in our province are the ones that are going to probably suffer the most here, but it will have implications for everyone and certainly for all of us in our communities, and the quality of public education. Again, as I said earlier, what I'm really concerned about is that they're going to make it harder and harder for anyone to do these jobs and to want to do these jobs. And in our system, we desperately need, now more than ever, our kids are struggling and they need that additional support. And these are the very people who make it happen. So I thank you all for joining me. I'm waving, I'm not pressing all the waves, but I'm waving at all of you. I really appreciate you joining me. I also want to say how much I appreciate when I meet you, many of you, and the nice things you say to me. And I feel like it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be here in this place and to be able to speak on behalf of so many Ontarians. And keep an eye out for our MPP Chandra Pasma as well, who's our new education critic. Of course, I'm running for the leadership of the Ontario NDP, so I can't be the critic as well. Hey, Daryl. And also our MPP Jamie West, who's our labor critic. Keep an eye on what MPP Wayne Gates is saying. There's a lot of educators in the official opposition: Jill Andrew, Terence Kernahan, Jen French, and I can tell you every one of our MPPs in our caucus feels very strongly about this. We're going to be there every second of the way. You can count on us, and you can count on the Ford government to keep changing the rules to suit them, even in the middle of the game. So, but keep an eye and an ear open. We'll also share as much information as we have about what actions are going to be taking place. But as I said, show up, be there for those workers. It's going to be really, really important. So thanks everybody for joining. I'll be keeping you updated. Bye.